these intense, even emotional warnings about the possible impact of Hurricane Milton come, of course, just a week and a half after Hurricane Helene banged into Florida's Big Bend region and then proceeded up and inland, where it caused just shockingly widespread and profound destruction in parts of Georgia and South Carolina and North Carolina and Virginia and Tennessee. And recovery efforts in those states continue. But one of the other things that people in these states are having to contend with, which is insane, is, on top of everything else, a tidal wave of disinformation and conspiracy theories designed to maximize the chaos and turn people against each other and reap whatever political points can be wrung out of it. I mean, amid everything else, here's the front page of the Winston-Salem Journal in North Carolina. Their front page, all columns above the fold headline, fighting misinformation. It's the last thing you think they'd have to be dealing with, given everything else they're dealing with. Hurricane Helene triggers misinformation surge. In Charlotte, North Carolina, here's the editorial board of the Charlotte Observer. Shame on Donald Trump for worsening North Carolina's Helene tragedy with political lies. FEMA has had to make a whole section of its website devoted to debunking false conspiracy theories and disinformation about the hurricane and the response that have been spread, among other people, by the Republican candidate for president of the United States. The North Carolina Department of Public Safety, again, with everything else they have to deal with, they have also had to make a fact versus rumor new website to help people sort through the trash that is being promoted for political benefit. I mean, back in reality, among people actually involved in the response, North Carolina's governor has called the federal response to Helene, quote, unprecedented. North Carolina Republican Senator Thom Tillis says he's impressed with the federal response. He says he is proud of the response effort, that they're doing a great job. A Republican state senator in North Carolina who represents Western North Carolina, he's posted a public plea, quote, friends, can I ask a small favor? Will you all help stop this conspiracy theory junk that's floating all over Facebook and the internet about the floods in Western North Carolina? Example, FEMA is stealing money from donations. Body bags ordered, but government has denied. Bodies not being buried. Government is controlling the weather from Antarctica. Government is trying to get lithium from Western North Carolina. Stacks of bodies left in hospitals, and on and on and on. He says, quote, please help stop this junk. It is just a distraction to people trying to do their job. Folks, this is a catastrophic event of which this country has never known. It is the largest crisis event in the history of North Carolina. The state is working nonstop. DOT has deployed workers from all over the state. Duke Power has 10,000 workers on this. FEMA is here. The National Guard is here in large numbers. And he goes on. Even some of the most partisan actors, Florida Republican Governor Ron DeSantis, even he says his state has received all the federal help that it's asked for. But in the Trump campaign, the federal government is denying anybody any help, right? In the Trump campaign and on Elon Musk's Twitter, they have decided it's better to mess with people and turn people against each other and lie about the response and see what they can stir up and see if Trump can benefit from it. I mean, here, for example, is the 9/11 truther, self-proclaimed white advocate, conspiracy theorist who Trump brought with him to the 9/11 commemoration last month in Manhattan, quote, the people in Appalachia should not comply with FEMA. This is a matter of survival. Do not comply with FEMA. This is what they're doing for political benefit, right? Sure, 6 different states coping with devastation from a hurricane less than 2 weeks ago, and another storm on the way that is so large and terrifying it is bringing meteorologists to tears. Trump campaign sees that and thinks, what better time than to mess with people? What better time is there than this? Because maybe we'll benefit from it. Maybe if people are pushed into the most extreme circumstances possible, maybe we'll benefit from things being as bad as they can possibly be. The Harris campaign just tonight has released a new ad pushing back at the lies that Trump and his campaign have been trafficking in about the hurricane response. Also reminding the country that this was not exactly his strong suit while he was in the White House in charge of efforts like this. Here it is again. This ad has just come out tonight.
I worked in the Trump administration.
Never in a million years did I ever think that I'd be working in the White House with a president that didn't care about the American people.
He would suggest not giving disaster relief to states that hadn't voted for him.
I remember one time after a wildfire in California, he wouldn't send relief because it was a Democratic state. So we went as far as looking up how many votes he got in those impacted areas to show him these are people who voted for you. This isn't normal. The job of the president is to protect Americans, regardless of politics.
If Trump's elected again, there'll be no one to stop his worst instincts. You'll have yes men help him implement Project 2025's agenda. Unchecked power, no guardrails.
They will be serving one man. I am voting for Kamala Harris because she will put the safety and security of every American first, whether they voted for her or not.
Again, that is just released tonight from the Harris campaign. In the wake of even Republican officials in multiple states affected by Hurricane Helene starting to beg Trump and his campaign to stop lying about the response, to stop spreading disinformation and conspiracy theories among people who rather desperately need real and reliable information and real help.